I'm Caity Massoud, and this is Flute Unscripted, candid conversations with musicians, makers, and masters. I sit down with a new artist every week and share their uncensored stories with you. You're listening to Season 1, brought to you by Flute Center of New York, the exclusive marketplace for flutes. Join us and subscribe, and please stay tuned to the end of the episode for a special Flute Center of New York code for our podcast listeners. By following her curiosity and intuition, Emi Ferguson has made a name for herself as a modern flutist, Baroque flutist, composer, arranger, producer, researcher, and vocalist. In her interview with me, Ms. Ferguson shares that she refuses to take no for an answer and will do whatever it takes to see a project through to the end. That approach has served her well. Her impressive career includes winning first prize at the NFA Young Artist Competition, New York Flute Club Young Artist Competition, the Mid-Atlantic Flute Competition, and the Juilliard Concerto Competition. Emi is passionate about new music and is a member of the American Modern Opera Company and New York New Music Ensemble. She is also a frequent guest artist with period ensembles including Toffel Music, the American Classical Orchestra, and Trinity Baroque Orchestra. Her September 11th memorial performance alongside Yo-Yo Ma, Paul Simon, and James Taylor is a permanent fixture at the 9/11 Museum, and she has given her own lectures and performances on TEDx. Emi Ferguson has carved out a niche for herself, playing the Silver Flute, historical flutes, and auxiliary flutes, performing repertoire that stretches from the Renaissance to today. Emi, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today and coming to the Flute Center of New York.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And coming here is always like the biggest disaster because I see all these flutes and want every single one.
You have a collection, don't you?
I do, but you always want more.
You have a bass?
I
Do you have an
don't
alto?
have
Oh,
a
you need to add
bass,
that in.
and I've been holding off on it, and just a couple weeks ago I sort of thought I think I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and go all in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, that's the one that I'm thinking about now, itching for, worrying about, all the good things.
Yeah. So what do you have? Alto?
Regular C flute, piccolo, alto, and then a whole wide array of early flutes, mm-hmm. and then a lot of world flutes as well. Yeah. So it's become quite a collection.
Well, New York is your home. You've been here, you've built your career here, but you were born in Japan.
Yes.
Right? You grew up in the UK.
Yes.
Then Boston, and then finally New York. So you've been all over. What's that been like growing up as a musician? Were you introduced to music at a very early age and kind of traveled with music throughout your journey, or did you pick it up in the States?
I was really lucky in that my parents introduced me to music at a very young age. Neither of them are musicians, and I think they'd always wanted to have music in their lives. And so when I was very little, they took me to a lot of children's music classes, and one thing led to another. And I started recorder when I was 3, and then piano when I was 4. And while I really enjoyed doing both of those, neither of them quite stuck mm-hmm. permanently. But when I was 6, I remember talking to my parents, and I said, I want to play the flute. I don't remember why I wanted to, but they were amazing. They're like, okay, whatever. That sounds awesome. So we were living in London at the time, and we went to the London equivalent of the Flute Center of New York, and we got my first flute. And I remember I came home and I opened it upside down, and it all fell out on the floor, and it was a
classic
very
beginner's mistake.
Yes, classic beginner's mistake. But 2 days later, I remember we went to a concert of Sir James and Lady Jean Galway, which was happening at the Barbican Centre in London, and I brought them the flute, and I said, can you teach me how to open the case? So I feel very good that they taught me, how to open it properly.
You learned from the best how to open the case.
Seriously.
Yeah. So you grew up in Boston?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we moved to the States, I moved to Boston, which was amazing as a flute player because you have, so many wonderful resources, both from an educational standpoint, but also being so close to so many great makers.
Mm-hmm. And then you got accepted to Juilliard?
I did, and moved to New York for my undergrad and have been here since then, which is insane.
Was that always a dream of yours to go to Juilliard? I mean, it is every musician's pinnacle. Was this a track, something you had your eye on for a really long time, or?
No, which is kind of funny to say since that's been my home for so long.
You teach there.
I teach there now, so it really has become such an important part of my life. But I went to a high school in Boston that had almost no music program. It was 100% academia focused. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of going to a conservatory was never one that was really given to me from my school. And playing the flute was just something I did on the side and that I really enjoyed. But as I got closer to the senior year, I thought it would be, I would love to get to spend more time doing music in a way that I had never been able to before. So I looked at a lot of different places for college, and I think I applied to 15 places.
Wow.
Which was insane.
That's a grueling audition season.
Yeah, sure. But it was amazing because I got to travel around the country and visit so many places that I had never been before, and really see and get to meet so many flute players. And that was great from, this almost very shielded atmosphere of not knowing what was out there. And I think that was also part of my thinking. I didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't know what was possible for me because I'd come from a very academia focused track. And so I auditioned at all these places and fell in love with many different schools and ended up here at Juilliard and never looked back.
Yeah.
which has been great. And it's one of those places that I didn't realize would become such an incredible home for me.
Yeah, well, that's a great experience to have at Juilliard. There are some people that feel like conservatories might not prepare them always for real world experiences, and you've kind of branched out and you've done a lot on your own and kind of taken the wheel. Do you feel like that was in part to your conservatory education, or do you feel like that was just a part of you being kind of entrepreneurial and taking things out on your own?
I think it's a combination for sure. I feel lucky that all my education and my family upbringing, before I got to Juilliard, there was never a question. It was like, you can do it, was the attitude.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that a lot because, today is like International Women's Day. Thinking about how lucky I was that nobody ever told me that I couldn't do something. And how that has had such a profound effect on me in the past couple years.
Yeah.
And so really when I got to Juilliard, I wanted to try everything that was available from that school, everything that I could possibly do. I wanted to play in every ensemble, try every different kind of music that they offered. And as a result, I ended up getting my fingers into lots of different niches within, the classical music world, which has been so fruitful and so rewarding for me. And I was lucky that the school did encourage that for me and gave me the pathways and the opportunities to do that in a way that I hadn't expected, because as you did mention, people often think of it as a very straight track school where you go in and you come out and you don't have any tangible skills. But I felt lucky that I was able to combine both sides of things while I was there.
And then when you're talking about dipping your toes into other areas of interest, is that why you went into a master's in Baroque Flute? That's a little bit of a switch up from traditional.
Yeah,
pathway.
I was really lucky that while I was doing my undergrad at Juilliard, they were sort of dipping their toes in the water of considering starting a historical performance degree. And so they held auditions. And I think we got like 2 days notice. It said auditions for a spring week-long masterclass at Juilliard with William Christie and members of Les Afro-Flûtes. If you're interested in learning about Baroque music and maybe playing original instruments, come to this room at this time and play a movement of Bach. And I happened to be free during that hour. And I had a Bach sonata ready to go. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll show up. And who knows what this is. Yeah. But again, I was sort of in the mentality of let me try everything that's available to me. So I showed up and I played for Bill Christie and the musicians of Les Afro-Flûtes, and was really lucky that they asked me to do this, week-long focused intensive, which ended up being the pilot program for the historical performance program. So the school bought 2 Baroque flutes and gave them to me and Rose Lombardo, who's now principal flute at San Diego Symphony. And they said, figure out how to play these. And the 2 of us were kind of like, oh goodness, this thing has no keys. We sound awful on
completely different fingering.
How are we going to make this work? And the school set us up with Skype lessons with Stephen Schultz, who's an amazing Baroque flute player and teaches at Carnegie Mellon. And this was back in the days when Skype lessons really didn't work. But even those, small interactions with him gave us this foundation to continue. I think for so many modern flute players, when you start with a traverso, it's so humbling. It's like going back and learning a new instrument. Yeah. And if you've already achieved a certain level of skill on the modern flute, the last thing you want is to go and feel, total beginner again. Yeah. So, it's I think for me, it was one of those things that the more you did it over time, okay, I
maybe makes you appreciative of your advancements as well on the classical flute.
Yeah, totally. So it was great. We figured out very basically how to play these instruments, and they did this pilot program for 2 years, and then the following year they held auditions for Juilliard's now historical performance program. And at the time I was in my undergrad, and I was in the 5-year accelerated degree program, which they have there, where they offer students who are at a certain academic level as well as performance level to combine their undergrad and master's degrees into 5 years instead of 6. And I thought, great, that'll save me some money, that'll save me some time, I'll get out of here. So I was in that track. However, at the end of my 4th year of my 5 combined, they asked me to join the first year of the historical performance master's degree. And part of me thought, well, why would I want to extend my time in school? But what was amazing and what ultimately persuaded me was that there was nowhere that I was going to get this opportunity to learn the traverso, to learn Baroque flute with such an incredible faculty and be surrounded by amazing peers, while also being able to continue all of my modern flute pursuits that I had at the school already. So I felt incredibly lucky that I could do this new program and also continue to play in all the modern ensembles that I wanted to.
Equipped with knowledge and experience from her studies of classical, modern, and Baroque flute at Juilliard, Emi fused together her interests in a new project, her debut album. Entitled Amour Cruel, the CD is an indie pop song cycle inspired by the music of the 17th century French cour. It was released by Arezzo Music in September 2017, spending 4 weeks on the classical crossover, and world music Billboard charts. Looking back, Emi admits that it was scary branching out on her own and that she had to work hard to gain respect and, most importantly, trust herself. This sounds like you've kind of followed your curiosity, your interests. You kind of let it lead you on wherever it may on your brave new path, I guess you could call it.
Yes.
Did you ever have hesitations, kind of thinking about, should I have gone a more traditional route at the time? I mean, now obviously there's hindsight, but at the time, were you a little hesitant about going into this master's and then, what afterwards?
I was absolutely worried about it because at the time, because the program was brand new at Juilliard, there were a lot of people who thought I was making the wrong decision. They thought that I was abandoning modern flute altogether, which is crazy. But I got a lot of people who thought like, oh, you must not be good anymore, which is the worst. The worst thing.
There's a stigma, I think, around that.
There is a stigma, and I think it's quickly now being erased because people are seeing the kinds of performances and artists who are working in that field. And I was lucky that because I was continued to do modern flute stuff, I was able to avoid a little bit of that stigma. But I had to work hard to prove to people that not only was I taking a risk and doing something that's a little bit untraditional for your average Juilliard flute student, but that you can do both, and you can do both well, and we can elevate both art forms by having a dialogue between the two.
Yeah, which I think you do in your album that you've released recently, right?
Yeah.
Amor Cruel.
Yeah, which was a kind of a blend of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been inspired by so many different kinds of music, and when I was in high school, I actually did a lot more jazz and wanted to completely go into jazz for college, and then realized at the time that there weren't very many opportunities for that as a flute player, and so I ended up at Juilliard, ended up doing a ton of contemporary music, a ton of Baroque music, but also loving pop music, and all different genres of pop music, which I think is more common amongst we classical musicians than
little
people,
secret that no one wants to talk about.
I
mean, you don't just listen to Bach on your free time when you're when you go home.
No, I mean,
you're doing the dishes, hanging out. Yes, it's okay to listen to pop music on the radio.
Great, no, I mean, there's a time and place for everything, and it's all great. So so Amor Cruel was kind of this mixture of all those different loves in music that I have, and the album is an 11-song cycle based on texts and fragments of music that were largely being created in the court of Louis XIV and his contemporaries, other courts in France at the time. And this is all music that I was actually introduced to by Bill Christie in that first week-long seminar that they had, like way back before everything had started with the historical performance program at Juilliard, which is kind of fun to think about. Some of the first music that I encountered on the Baroque flute has now become stuck with me as such an important part of my identity now. But they're called airs de cour, or courtly airs, and I've been in love with this music for a really long time. It's kind of a niche of a niche of a niche when you're thinking about classical music, Baroque music, period, practice Baroque music, French Baroque music, and then even smaller within that, these airs de cour. And they're largely songs, often written for voice and lute. But it was at this time, sort of in the 1680s, when the flute had gone through this major overhaul by instrument makers in the court of Louis XIV. And it went, from being a one-piece instrument to being a 2 or 3-piece instrument, from a cylindrical bore back, now to a conical bore. All these small changes happened that allowed the flute to become this very, very trendy instrument, because it had this beautiful sweet tone that the recorder was a little bit brighter. We were able to get dynamics, the softest dynamics, and relatively loud dynamics, which again the recorder or oboe couldn't get in the same way. So it became so trendy and started getting used in these songs.
Have you ever overcome your nerves singing in public?
Yeah, now I do it all the time, which, is amazing. But it was one of those things that when I first started writing these songs, I was sitting at home doing it all myself, and I was making these demos. And it was easier for me to sing them than to hire someone to come in, train them how to do the French, train them the style that I'm looking for. And then as I really slowly started to show people some of them, they said, well, why wouldn't you do these? And I thought, for so long I've been told I'm a flute player.
Right.
But wait a second, I can still, it was like, I can still play the modern flute and do Baroque flute. I can still play all the flutes and sing, because what is the flute other than kind of an
extension of your voice
singing?
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And
do you think it's helped your flute playing a little bit too?
Oh, entirely. Yeah. I think the two have really helped each other and informed each other in a great way.
Do you have any vocal warm-ups that are easy enough to share with
I'm bad in that, because I really haven't had like any vocal training sort of on the physical standpoint. I don't. And my way of doing it so far has kind of been like, fingers crossed, hope it all comes out. But I think as flute players, we understand how to support a sound.
Right.
We understand how the airstream works, and we're really in tune with that side of our body because we've been thinking about it for years.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that I think first-time singers have to go through, we've done. Does that mean that I don't need a whole ton more work? No. And it's something that I'm really trying to learn about now, is trying to make sure that when I'm singing, I'm not hurting myself.
Right.
Again, I think it's something that we understand intrinsically as flute players, because we know when we're pushing ourselves, we know how to keep things open, and how to manipulate sound from inside our body. But it is something that I'm trying to investigate more now as I am singing more and more, and doing these performances that I didn't think, when I started at Juilliard, I didn't think I'd be doing this.
Right.
And I love it. And I've been so overwhelmed by how the classical community has embraced this project and embraced me doing this, and not pigeonholed me in one place or another. Like with Baroque flute, I'm able to keep my modern and keep both things strong. And now it seems like it's just adding another spoke to the wheel of things that I love to do. And I think the climate today, certainly in New York, in the classical music world, is that's great.
Yeah.
We see so many incredible musicians out there who are doing a wide variety of things, and I'm continually inspired by just walking out my front door and seeing that.
And do you feel like you're kind of breaking down certain stereotypes of classical music as well, especially in your performances and your music live performances? I mean, you choose unconventional venues, pubs, small intimate spaces. Your music is blending together different styles. You're singing and playing the flute. Do you think it's, you're moving classical music in a path that you want to see, where there's this intimate relationship between listener and performer, instead of what we're used to, which is a huge concert hall, one person on the stage, masses of audience members being quiet, sitting there listening?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I am. And it's amazing to think about how today, I think the way that people interact with music is more personal in some levels than it has ever been. You get to curate your playlist. You have everything you want on demand inside your ears. That's amazing. But also, it's like that double-edged sword. It's the most personal it's been, and it's the most unpersonal it's ever been, because you don't need that physical interaction with the player anymore.
It takes away the other aspects of music as well. There's a live component, and it's not just about listening. It's about being in the space and watching and participating.
Right. And so for me, it's been fun to have created this album version, this recorded version of these songs, and now to get to explore them and do them differently. Each time I do them live, it's a completely different instrumentation or a different feel, different venues. And it's been really exciting to see how people who might not normally listen to French Baroque flute music, have, you know, so I got into this because it reminded me of something I heard on the radio, but now I'm like loving Rameau. I'm like,
awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love Rameau too. And
sounds like a bumper sticker.
No, seriously. And there's like totally a place for Rameau to live next to Taylor Swift, and for them to both feed different parts of your musical life as a listener. And what's also been great is that because we're largely playing these songs on unconventional instruments, or instruments that people haven't seen. The band on the album is, you know, Baroque flutes, theorbo, classical guitar, viola da gamba, and bass and percussion. And so they're seeing instruments that they've never seen before. And, you know, that's such a great way to get people engaged, to, you know, hear these sounds that they really have kind of a very deep reaction to, and then want to get to know more about the music, and as a result, classical music as a whole. So that's been really fulfilling and awesome.
Well, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for chatting and taking the time to sit down.
My pleasure.
You can check out all of Emi's upcoming performances, videos, and links to her new album on her interactive website, emiferguson.com. While I'm not sure if our I Love Rameau bumper sticker idea will take hold, I am sure she will continue to engage audiences with her unique performances. Thank you to Emi Ferguson for providing songs from her album Amour Cruel. This has been an episode of Flute Unscripted. This podcast is sponsored by the Flute Center of New York. Visit their website at flutesforsale.com for the largest selection of new and pre-owned instruments. Use this season's promo code LISTEN for a special deal of $50 off any purchase of $4.99 or more. You can follow the Flute Center on Instagram and like them on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest events and masterclasses. Special thanks to our owner Phil Unger, the Flute Center team, and Stefan Huskoldson for our theme music.